The sterile corridors of Research Station Omega-7 echoed with the hollow footsteps of abandonment. Jace Corvin adjusted his bioscanner, its soft blue glow cutting through the perpetual twilight that had settled over the facility since its evacuation 3 months ago. As a xenobiologist for the Terran Scientific Consortium, he'd been sent to catalog any remaining specimens before the station's scheduled demolition. What he hadn't expected was to find her. The containment chamber sat at the end of the forgotten medical wing, its reinforced transperistyle walls clouded with condensation. Inside, suspended in a life support harness that hummed with quiet efficiency, was the most beautiful and heartbreaking sight Jace had ever encountered. She appeared to be a hybrid of some kind, her delicate features unmistakably feminine yet touched with the ethereal quality he'd seen in the Zilani species. Iridescent scales traced elegant patterns along her arms and neck, shifting from deep emerald to silver as the light caught them. Her hair, an impossible shade of starlight silver, floated gently in the chamber's atmosphere control field. But it was her eyes that captured him completely, even in her unconscious state. They seemed to hold depths of intelligence and pain that made his chest tighten with unexpected emotion. According to the bio readings, she was completely paralyzed from the neck down, yet somehow, Jace felt as though she was aware of everything around her. Subject designation 097, he read from the neglected data pad beside her chamber. Genetic hybrid experiment. Status, failed. Recommendation, termination pending resource reallocation. The clinical language made his stomach turn. This wasn't a failed experiment, this was a person. Someone who had been subjected to unimaginable procedures and then simply forgotten when she didn't meet their expectations. Jace's comm unit crackled to life, interrupting his thoughts. Corvin, this is Control. What's your status down there? He hesitated, his gaze never leaving the figure in the chamber. Still cataloging. Control. Found some interesting specimens in the medical wing. Copy that. Council Leader Vrex wants a full report in 2 hours. The demolition crews are standing by. 2 hours. In 2 hours, this place would be nothing but space debris, and 097 would die alone, forgotten by the galaxy that had created her. Something deep in Jace's chest rebelled against that fate with a fierce intensity. That surprised him. He'd always been logical, methodical, it's what made him good at his job. But looking at her, logic seemed suddenly inadequate. Control, I'm going to need more time down here, he said, making a decision that would change both their lives forever. Negative, Corvin. Vrex was very specific about the timeline. Whatever you found, catalog it and move on. Jace reached out and placed his palm against the chamber's surface. The metal felt cold beneath his fingers, but something warm seemed to pulse just beyond it. What if I told you I found something that could revolutionize our understanding of genetic compatibility between species? There was a long pause. Explain. He took a deep breath, knowing he was about to lie to his superiors for the first time in his career. The hybrid shows unprecedented neural development. Her brain patterns are unlike anything in our databases. If we could study her properly, the medical applications alone could save thousands of lives. Another pause, longer this time. Finally, Vrex's distinctive voice came through the comm, its multiple tones creating an almost musical quality that somehow managed to sound cold and calculating. Corvin, you will transfer any viable specimens to Transport Bay 3 within the hour. Anything not deemed immediately useful will be disposed of with the station. Understood. Council Leader. Jace's hand remained pressed against the chamber as he spoke. I'll need clearance to access the medical bay's transport systems. Granted. Don't waste time on sentiment, Corvin. Science demands difficult choices. As the comm clicked off, Jace found himself wondering when science had become synonymous with callousness. He'd spent years studying alien biology, had published papers on genetic adaptation and hybrid viability, but he'd never had to look into the eyes of his subjects. He'd never had to see the person behind the data. Working quickly, he began the delicate process of preparing 097 for transport. The life support systems were portable, thank the stars, and her chamber was designed to be moved when necessary. As he worked, he found himself talking to her, even though she showed no signs of consciousness. "I don't know if you can hear me," he said softly, checking the atmospheric controls. "But I want you to know that you're not going to die here. I don't care what their reports say, you're not a failed anything. You're extraordinary." For just a moment, he could have sworn he saw her eyes move beneath their closed lids. But the biomonitors showed no change in her condition. Still, something in the air seemed to shift, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The transport to his personal research vessel went smoothly. Though Jace's heart hammered against his ribs the entire time, he was stealing her there. Was no other word for it. He was stealing a sentient being from her captors and taking her somewhere she might actually have a chance at life. The ethical implications would have given him sleepless nights a week ago. Now, they seemed laughably irrelevant compared to the alternative. Once aboard his ship, the Wanderer, Jace carefully installed Zara's chamber in his medical bay. The space was small, but well-equipped, and he'd spent enough time modifying it for xenobiological research that he was confident he could care for her properly. As the ship's systems came online, and the gentle hum of the life support filled the air, he finally allowed himself to really look at her again. In the softer lighting of his ship, she seemed even more beautiful. The harsh fluorescence of the station had washed out her coloring, but here he could see the subtle play of colors in her scales. The way her hair seemed to catch and hold light like captured starfire. Her lips, slightly parted as she breathed with mechanical assistance, were the pale pink of earth roses. "What did they do to you?" he whispered, consulting the medical data he'd managed to download before leaving the station. The files painted a picture of horror that made his hands shake with rage. Genetic manipulation from before birth, neural pathway alterations, experimental procedures that would have been considered torture if performed on any recognized sentient species. But there was something else in the data, something that made his scientific mind race with possibilities. Her brain activity wasn't diminished by her paralysis. If anything, it showed patterns of complexity that shouldn't have been possible. There were neural pathways that simply didn't exist in any known species, connections that suggested capabilities beyond current understanding. As if responding to his thoughts, the monitoring equipment suddenly came alive with activity. Zara's eyes snapped open, revealing irises of the most startling violet he'd ever seen. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other across the medical bay, and Jace felt something pass between them. Not quite touch, not quite sound, but somehow both and neither. Then her eyes closed again, and the monitors returned to their steady, quiet rhythm. But Jace knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that she had been aware. She had seen him, recognized him somehow, and in that brief moment of connection, his life had irrevocably changed. Outside the viewports of the Wanderer, the stars wheeled silently in their ancient dance, indifferent to the small drama playing out in the medical bay. But for Jace Corvin, the universe had suddenly become a much more complicated and infinitely more precious place. He settled into the chair beside her chamber, his hand once again finding its way to the transparistyle surface. "I don't know what you are," he said quietly, "but I know what you're not. You're not a failure. You're not disposable. And as long as I have anything to say about it, you're not alone." The gentle hum of the ship's engines carried them away from the dying research station and toward an uncertain future. But for the first time in months, Jace felt something he'd almost forgotten: hope. 3 days into their journey, Jace had established a routine that revolved entirely round Zara's care. He monitored her vitals every hour, adjusted her nutrient feeds, and ran diagnostic scans that revealed more questions than answers. But it was during the quiet hours of ship's night that something extraordinary began to happen. The first time Zace felt the gentle touch against his mind, he assumed it was exhaustion playing tricks on him. He'd been working 18-hour days, surviving on stimulants and sheer stubbornness, when suddenly he found himself thinking about a garden he'd never seen, rolling hills covered in flowers that shifted color with the wind, beneath a sky painted in impossible shades of amber and rose. The second time, he was certain he was losing his mind. The image was too vivid, too detailed to be his imagination, a childhood memory of small hands reaching toward dancing lights that sang with crystalline voices. But it wasn't his childhood. The hands were too delicate, the fingers too long, and the lights No human world had ever produced anything like those luminous creatures. By the third time, Jace finally understood. Zara wasn't just conscious, she was trying to communicate. "You're in there, aren't you?" he whispered to her during one of his midnight vigils. Her chamber glowed softly in the dimmed lighting of the medical bay, and her face, peaceful in its stillness, seemed almost luminous. "You're aware of everything this time." The response was immediate and unmistakable. Warmth flooded through his mind, carrying with it a sense of profound gratitude and something else that made his heart skip lone line. SS so deep it took his breath away. She had been trapped, conscious and unable to move or speak, for months, maybe longer. Jace leaned forward, pressing both palms against her chamber. "I'm going to help you, I promise. But I need to understand what they did to you first." The images that followed nearly overwhelmed him. He saw Zara's memories as if they were his own, the cold laboratories, the endless procedures, the faces of scientists who looked at her with the same detachment. They might show a particularly interesting specimen of bacteria, but worse than the physical pain was the emotional isolation. No one had spoken to her as if she were a person. No one had seen her as anything more than an experiment. When the mental connection finally faded, Jace found tears on his cheeks. He wiped them away with shaking hands, his resolve hardening into something unbreakable. Whatever it took, wherever he had to go, he would find a way to help her. The answer came from an unexpected source. Nix Thorne was a xenobiologist like Jace, but their career had taken a very different path. Where Jace worked within the established scientific community, Nix operated in the shadows, studying phenomena that the mainstream refused to acknowledge. Treating patients that others had written off as hopeless, they ran a small research station, hidden in the Veil Nebula, far from the prying eyes of the Galactic authorities. Jace had known Nix since their academy days, and while their friendship had grown distant over the years, he trusted them implicitly. More importantly, Nix had a reputation for taking on cases that other doctors wouldn't touch. Jace Corvin. Nix's voice carried clearly over the secure comm channel, their tone mixing surprise with genuine pleasure. "It's been too long. What brings you to my little corner of nowhere?" "I need help, Nix, and I need someone I can trust absolutely." There was a pause, and when Nix spoke again, their voice had taken on the careful neutrality that meant they were listening with their professional ears. "Tell me." Jace explained everything: Zara's condition, her obvious intelligence, the telepathic connection he'd experienced. He left out nothing, including his growing feelings for the woman in the chamber. When he finished, the silence stretched so long he began to wonder if the connection had been lost. "Jace," Nix finally said, "what you're describing, the neural patterns, the telepathic abilities, do you have any idea what kind of experiments they must have performed to create something like this?" "I have some idea," Jace replied grimly. "The files I managed to download paint a pretty clear picture. The question is, can you help her?" "I don't know, but I know someone who might." "Docket coordinates I'm sending you now. And Jace, be careful. If even half of what you've told me is true, there are going to be people looking for her. Powerful people who don't like to lose their investments." The journey to Nix's station took 2 more days, during which Jace found himself spending more and more time in telepathic contact with Zara. Each connection revealed more of her personality, her quick wit, her deep compassion, her fierce independence that hadn't been broken despite months of captivity. He learned that her name wasn't really Zara 97 at all, but Zara Moonwhisper, a name that carried cultural significance in her mother's people. Her father had been human, her mother from a species called the Luminary, beings of exceptional telepathic ability who had mysteriously vanished from known space decades ago. The experiments had been designed to unlock and amplify her natural telepathic gifts. But something had gone wrong. Instead of simply enhancing her abilities, the procedures had created new neural pathways that her nervous system couldn't support. The resulting overload had caused the paralysis, but it had also given her capabilities that no one fully understood. "I can feel you," she told him during one of their mental conversations, her thoughts carrying a warmth that made his chest tight with emotion. "Not just your thoughts, but you, your heart, your soul. I've never experienced anything like it. Is it unpleasant?" Jace asked, suddenly self-conscious about the depth of his feelings for her. The mental equivalent of laughter bubbled through their connection. No, Jace, it's beautiful. You're beautiful, inside, where it matters most. Nyx's station was a marvel of hidden engineering. Built into a massive asteroid and shielded by the nebula's natural electromagnetic interference. As the Wanderer docked, Jace caught his first glimpse of his old friend in person. Nyx had changed. Little over the years, still tall and lean, with the prematurely silver hair that marked them as someone who'd spent too much time exposed to exotic radiation. But their eyes held a depth of knowledge and compassion that hadn't been there during their academy days. She's remarkable, Nyx said without preamble as they helped transfer Zara's chamber to the station's medical facility. Her neural activity is unlike anything I've ever seen. But you're right, she's definitely conscious and aware. The station's medical bay was far more advanced than anything Jace had access to aboard his ship. Within hours, Nyx had connected Zara to a neural interface that allowed for much clearer communication. For the first time since finding her, Jace was able to hear her voice not just in his mind, but through the station's speakers. "Thank you," were her first words, spoken in a voice like music made audible. "Both of you. I had begun to think I would never speak again." Jace felt his heart stop for a moment. Her voice was everything he had imagined and more, warm, intelligent, with an accent that spoke of distant worlds and lost cultures. "Zara," he breathed, moving closer to her chamber. "It's so good to finally hear you, and to see you clearly," she replied, her violet eyes tracking to meet his. "The neural interface is allowing me much greater control over my telepathic abilities. I can focus now instead of just broadcasting randomly." Nyx, ever the scientist, was already running detailed scans. "Zara, I'm going to be blunt with you. The procedures you underwent, they should have killed you. The fact that you survived at all is miraculous, but I think I might understand why." They pulled up a holographic display of Zara's neural structure, the image rotating slowly in the air above her chamber. "Your brain has essentially rewired itself to accommodate abilities that shouldn't be possible. But the process is incomplete, which is what's causing the paralysis. Your nervous system is caught between two different configurations, your original biology and something entirely new." "Can it be fixed?" Jace asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. "Fixed isn't the right word," Nyx said carefully, "but it might be possible to complete the process. Help her nervous system finish the transformation it began. The risk is enormous, though. If we're wrong about any aspect of this, we could make her condition worse, or kill me." Zara finished quietly. "I understand, and I accept the risk." "Zara, no," Jace said immediately. "We'll find another way. Jace." Her voice, even through the speakers, carried an authority that stopped his protest cold. "I've been trapped in this body for months, conscious but unable to move, unable to touch, unable to truly live. If there's a chance to change that, I have to take it. Even if the alternative is death, at least it would be my choice." The procedure would take days to prepare, and during that time, Jace found himself spending every possible moment with Zara through the neural interface. She could control limited holographic projections, allowing her to appear as a shimmering figure of light that could move freely round the station. It was the closest thing to physical presence she'd had since her paralysis began. They talked for hours about science, about art, about the vast beauty of the universe and their small place in it. Zara shared memories of her childhood among the Luminari, describing a culture based on emotional and telepathic connection rather than verbal communication. Jace told her about Earth, about his work among the stars, about the loneliness he'd knee. The Relentless hung in space like a predator sizing up its prey, its weapons arrays glowing with barely restrained energy through the station's viewports. Jace could see the sleek lines of the military vessel, its hull bearing the distinctive markings of the Galactic Council's Enforcement Division. Captain Roth wasn't just any military officer, he was a hunter, specialized in retrieving lost assets for the Council's more questionable projects. "Sanctuary Station," Roth's voice crackled through the calm system, cold and precise. "You are harboring stolen Council property. Surrender the hybrid designated 097 immediately, or face the consequences. In the medical bay, Zara's transformation was reaching a critical phase. The neural interface sparked and hummed as her brain patterns shifted, reorganizing themselves into configurations that shouldn't have been possible. Her body, still motionless in the chamber, began to show signs of change, a subtle luminescence beneath her skin, the scales along her arms brightening to an almost metallic sheen. "Status report," Jace demanded, his eyes never leaving Zara's. "Vitals." Nyx's hands flew over the controls, their expression tense with concentration. "Neural pathway reconstruction is at 60%, but the process is accelerating beyond our projections. Her mind is adapting faster than we anticipated." "How much longer?" 20 minutes, maybe 30. But Jace, Nyx hesitated. "The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever she's becoming, it's going to be extraordinary." A new voice cut through the tension, young, determined, and crackling with defiance. "Sanctuary Station, this is Kess. Valdrin aboard the Freedom's Edge. We're here to help." Jace spun toward the communications console, hope flaring in his chest. He'd heard whispers of Kess Valdrin, a rebel leader who'd made it her mission to rescue victims of illegal experimentation. If the stories were true, she commanded a network of sympathizers throughout the galaxy, people who'd grown sick of the Council's increasingly brutal methods. "Kess Valdrin," Roth's voice carried a note of barely controlled fury. "I should have known you'd stick your nose into Council business. Stand down immediately." "Counteroffer, Roth," came the reply, sweet as poisoned honey. "Go to hell." The space around the station suddenly erupted with activity as 3 more ships decloaked, sleek, fast vessels bristling with unconventional weapons. The Freedom's Edge led the formation, its captain apparently as bold as her reputation suggested. But even as the cavalry arrived, something else was happening in the medical bay. Zara's eyes snapped open, but they were no longer the violet he remembered. They glowed with an inner light that seemed to contain entire galaxies. And when she looked at him, Jace felt her presence in his mind with a clarity that took his breath away. "Jace," her mental voice was stronger now, carrying harmonics that resonated through his entire being. "I can feel them all. Everyone on this station, everyone in the ships nearby, their emotions, their thoughts. It's overwhelming." "Zara, stay focused on me," he said aloud, moving closer to her chamber. "Use our connection as an anchor." Through the neural link, he felt her consciousness expanding, touching the minds of everyone within range. She gasped a sound that somehow reached him both audibly and telepathically as she encountered the depth of emotion surrounding them. Nyx's fierce determination to save her, Kess Valdrin's burning hatred for the Council's injustices, Captain Roth's cold obsession with completing his mission. And something else, other minds, hidden but familiar, more victims of the Council's experiments, scattered across the galaxy, but somehow connected to Zara through the neural modifications they shared. "There are others," she whispered in his mind. "So many others, they're calling to me." The battle erupted outside as the rebel ships engaged Roth's vessel. Energy beams lanced through space, illuminating the nebula in brilliant flashes of blue and gold. But inside the medical bay, a different kind of transformation was taking place. "The paralysis is receding," Nyx announced, amazement coloring their voice. "Her nervous system is integrating the new neural pathways. Jace, she's actually moving." And she was. Zara's fingers twitched first. Then her hand lifted slightly from the chamber's support surface. Her breathing, no longer dependent on the artificial respirator, deepened and strengthened. But it was her eyes that held Jace transfixed. They seemed to contain depths of knowledge and power that made his heart race with equal parts wonder and fear. "Can you hear me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," she replied, her actual voice harmonizing with the mental connection in ways that made reality itself seem to shimmer. "I can hear everything, feel everything. Jace, the experiments didn't just change me, they connected me to a network of minds across the galaxy. Others like me, others who've survived what they did to us." Before he could respond, the station shuddered under weapons fire. Captain Roth had broken through the rebel defensive line and was targeting the station directly. "He's trying to destroy the medical bay," Nyx said grimly. "He'd rather kill her than let us keep her." Zara's expression hardened. and Jace felt a surge of power through their connection that made his hair stand on end. "No," she said, her voice carrying overtones that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond sound. "No more." She closed her eyes, and suddenly every electronic system on the station began behaving strangely. Lights flickered and patterns that somehow suggested communication. Computer displays showed cascading data streams that looked almost like neural networks. And through it all, Jace felt Zara's consciousness expanding, reaching out across space to touch minds he couldn't even imagine on the relentless. Captain Roth suddenly staggered, clutching his head as alien thoughts invaded his mind. He saw himself as Zara saw him, a predator in uniform, a man who'd traded his conscience for advancement and authority. The vision was so vivid, so damning, that he actually cried out in anguish. But Zara wasn't finished with him. Through their telepathic link, Jace felt her accessing Roth's memories, learning the locations of other research facilities, other victims. Her consciousness touched dozens of minds across the galaxy, subjects of failed experiments, some barely, clinging to life in forgotten laboratories. "They're all connected," she told Jace, wonder and horror mixing in her mental voice. "The experiments created a neural network spanning light years. We're all linked, all the survivors. And now that I'm fully awakened, you can coordinate them," Jace finished, understanding flooding through him. "You can help them all." The station shuddered again, but this time it wasn't from weapons fire. It was from the massive energy surge radiating from Zara herself. Her chamber's containment field flickered and died. As she sat up for the first time in months, her movements fluid and graceful despite the extended paralysis. Nix stepped back in amazement. "The transformation is complete, but her energy output is beyond anything our sensors can measure." Zara's feet touched the deck plating, and she actually stood for the first time since her imprisonment. Her scales had taken on an opalescent quality that seemed to shift through every color of the spectrum, and her hair moved as if touched by invisible winds. When she looked at Jace, he felt his heart stop with the sheer beauty of her. "Hello," she said simply, her real voice carrying the same musical quality he'd heard through the speakers, but infinitely richer and more complex. Before he could respond, the comm system crackled to life with a new voice, older, calmer, but carrying an authority that made everyone listen. "This is Tomas Reed aboard the transport ship Safe Harbor," the voice announced. "We're here to offer sanctuary to anyone fleeing council persecution." Zara Moon whisper, "If you can hear this, your people are waiting for you." Jace felt Zara's sharp intake of breath. Through their connection, he sensed recognition and something deeper, hope mixed with long-buried grief. "My people," she whispered. "The Luminari," Tomas Reed continued. "Your mother's people. They didn't vanish, Zara. They went into hiding when the council began hunting them for their telepathic abilities. They've been waiting, hoping you survived." Tears began flowing down Zara's cheeks, the first tears she'd been able to shed in months. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of joy, of relief, of a homecoming she'd never dared hope for. "We have to go," she said, turning to Jace. "But not just us. All of them, everyone connected to this network. I can feel them." "Jace, dozens of survivors scattered across the galaxy, all suffering as I did. We have to save them." Jace took her hands in his, the first time he'd been able to touch her skin to skin. Her scales were warm and smooth, pulsing gently with internal light. "Then we save them," he said simply. "All of them." Kes Valdrin's voice cut through the moment. "Hate to interrupt the reunion, but we've got incoming." Roth called for reinforcements, and they're not going to be as easy to discourage as he was. Through the viewports, they could see new ships dropping out of hyperspace, a full council task force armed and ready for a siege. But Zara seemed unconcerned. She closed her eyes, and Jace felt her consciousness reaching out again, this time touching every mind in the rebel fleet. Together, her voice echoed in all their thoughts simultaneously. "We're stronger together." And suddenly, the rebel ships began moving with a coordination that should have been impossible. Kes Valdrin gasped as her tactical displays showed flight patterns that seemed almost telepathically guided. The Freedom's Edge and its escorts Mo. The hidden world of Lumina's Rest existed in a pocket of spacetime that defied conventional physics. accessible only through coordinates that changed with the galactic tides. As the safe harbor emerged from its dimensional fold, Jace pressed his face to the viewport and gasped at the sight before them. Crystalline spires reached toward twin suns, their surfaces refracting light into cascades of impossible colors. The very air seemed to shimmer with telepathic energy, and through his bond with Zara, he could feel the collective consciousness of thousands of luminary minds welcoming them home. "It's beautiful," Zara whispered beside him, tears streaming down her luminescent cheeks. Through their connection, he felt her overwhelming joy at seeing her ancestral home, mixed with the bittersweet knowledge of how much she had lost. During her years of captivity, Elder Quinn awaited them at the crystalline landing platform, his ancient form radiating a wisdom that seemed to bend reality around him. His scales held the deep blue silver of old starlight, and his eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations held depths that made even Zara's enhanced perception seem limited. "Child of two worlds," he said as Zara descended the ramp, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated in multiple dimensions. "You have awakened something that was always meant to be. The network calls to you." But even as the reunion unfolded, dark clouds gathered on the political horizon. General Voss of the Galactic Council had declared Zara and her growing network of telepathic survivors an existential threat to galactic stability. His massive fleet, the Iron Fist Armada, was already moving toward the outer systems, destroying any vessel suspected of harboring telepathic insurgents. "The General sees only through the lens of fear," Elder Quinn explained as they gathered in the crystal chamber, a vast dome where telepathic energy flowed like visible light. "He believes that unity of mind means death of individual will. He cannot comprehend that consciousness can expand without consuming." Jace watched Zara as she stood at the chamber's center, her form glowing with an inner radiance that had grown stronger since their arrival. Through their bond, he could feel her connection to the network dozens of minds across the galaxy, all linked through the neural modifications forced upon them by Council experiments. What had been intended as a weapon of control had become something beautiful and terrifying, a collective consciousness that transcended species boundaries. "Show me," Elder Quinn said gently. "Let us see what they have made you capable of." Zara closed her eyes and extended her awareness instantly. The crystal chamber filled with holographic projection scenes from across the galaxy, showing other survivors of the experiments. Jace saw a Vexian male named Corval using telekinetic abilities to free prisoners from a council detention center. A human woman called Vera was healing wounded rebels with touch that seemed to mend flesh and bone through pure will. An aquatic being whose species Jace didn't recognize was manipulating water itself, creating tidal waves that swept away council research facilities. "We're not just connected," Zara said, her voice carrying new harmonics that made the crystals around them resonate. "We're becoming something new, something that can reshape reality itself." But the power came with a terrible cost. Through their bond, Jace felt the strain on Zara's consciousness as she tried to coordinate with dozens of minds. Simultaneously, each connection required part of her essence, and he could see her beginning to fragment under the load. "Zara, you have to be careful," he said, taking her hand. "You're pushing too hard. Let others help carry the burden." "I can't," she replied, her mental voice edged with exhaustion. "If I release control, even for a moment, someone could be lost. Someone could die because I wasn't strong enough to guide them." Elder Quinn's expression grew troubled as he observed their interaction. "The bonding between you," he said to Jace, "it is deeper than mere telepathic connection. You are anchoring her consciousness, preventing her from losing herself in the network entirely." "What does that mean?" Jace asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "It means," a new voice interjected, "that you're the key to either her salvation or her destruction." They turned to see Mira Cross entering the chamber, her diplomatic robes marking her as an official representative of the Terran Alliance. But her expression was grim, and she carried news that made Jace's blood run cold. "General Voss has issued an ultimatum," Mira announced. "Either the Luminaries surrender Zara and help him locate all network members, or he will begin systematic bombardment of civilian targets. He's already destroyed 3 medical stations, claiming they were harboring telepathic terrorists. Zara's glow flickered as anguish flooded through the network. Through their connection, Jace felt the collective pain of every survivor as they learned of the deaths innocent people killed simply because they had shown compassion to victims of council experiments. "He's forcing us to choose," Zara said, her voice breaking. "Either I surrender myself to protect innocent lives, or I watch the galaxy burn because of what I've become. There's a third option," Elder Quinn said quietly, "but it would require you to risk everything you are." The ancient luminari led them deeper into the crystal formations, to a chamber that hummed with energies Jace had never encountered. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change as he looked at them, and at the center stood a device that looked like it had been grown rather than built. "This is the Consciousness Forge," Elder Quinn explained. "Our ancestors created it during the First Great War against those who would enslave minds. It can amplify telepathic abilities beyond all known limits, but the process is transformative." "What kind of transformation?" Jace asked, though he dreaded the answer. "The consciousness expands beyond the physical form," Quinn replied. "The subject becomes one with the telepathic field itself, capable of reaching every mind in the galaxy simultaneously. They become a force of nature, a living embodiment of unified consciousness, but they cease to be individual," Zara finished, understanding flooding through their bond. "They become part of something larger, losing their personal identity in the process." "The records suggest it can be survived," Elder Quinn said carefully. "If the subject has a strong enough anchor to their original self, someone whose love is so deep, so unwavering, that it can call them back from the infinite." Jace felt his heart stop as the implications became clear. They were asking Zara to risk losing everything she was, banking on his love being strong enough to keep her anchored to her individual identity. The stakes couldn't be higher if they failed. She would be lost forever, her consciousness scattered across the galaxy. If they succeeded, she would have the power to stop General Voss and protect the network permanently. "There has to be another way," he said desperately. "The General's fleet will arrive within hours," Mira reported, checking her communications device, "and our intelligence suggests he's carrying weapons specifically designed to disrupt telepathic abilities. If he reaches this world, everyone here dies." Through the network connection, they could all feel the fear and desperation of the other survivors. Ships were converging on Lumina's Rest from across the galaxy, not just Council forces, but refugees, fleeing the systematic destruction Voss had unleashed. Thousands of innocent lives hung in the balance. Zara stepped toward the Consciousness Forge, her expression resolute despite the terror Jace could feel through their bond. "I have to try," she said. "If there's even a chance this could save them all." "Zara, no." Jace grabbed her arm, spinning her to face him. "I won't lose you, not when I've just found you. And I won't let others die because I was too afraid to act," she replied, her eyes blazing with determination. "Jace, our love is strong enough. I can feel it in every fiber of my being. If anyone can bring me back from the infinite, it's you." The sound of spacetime tearing announced the arrival of General Voss's advance fleet. Through the crystal chambers, transparent walls, they could see massive warships dropping out of hyperspace, their weapons already charging for bombardment. "The decision must be made now," Elder Quinn said urgently. "Once the bombardment begins, the psychic interference will make the Consciousness Forge unusable." Zara looked at Jace one last time, her love flowing through their connection like molten starlight. "Trust me," she whispered. "Trust us," before he could stop her. She stepped into the Consciousness Forge. The ancient device activated with a sound like reality itself singing, and suddenly Zara's physical form began to dissolve, her consciousness expanding outward at impossible speed. Through their bond, Jace felt her awareness exploding across the galaxy. She touched every mind in the network simultaneously. But more than that, she began reaching every telepathic species, every sentient being capable of psychic connection. Her consciousness became a bridge between worlds, between species, between hearts and minds that had never known they could be connected. But as her power grew, her individual identity began to fragment. Jace felt her slipping away, becoming lost in the infinite expanse of galactic consciousness. In desperation, He pressed his hands against the consciousness forge, pouring every ounce of his love through their connection. "Zara," he called, both aloud and telepathically. "Remember who you are. Remember us, for it terrify."